As we saw in the code before, to create a TLS server, we need a server key store. This is going to have inside of it the server's private key and public key, and a certificate for that public key, along with the certificate authorities and the full certificate chain that would be needed with that server. This server key store.p12, it's password protected, so we have to provide a password as well, and it can be created with a command like this, openssl pkcs12 command. We must have already created the server's private public key pair, as we showed last time, and that's sitting in server private key. We also need the certificate authorities signed server certificate so that it can be provided to complete the whole certificate chain. And then we write it out to that server key store file with its password protection. On the client side, clients don't necessarily have to have their own keys, but they do need the root certificate that they're going to trust. So we similarly create a client key store here with key tool and importing the certificate. Again, it's a password protected file. Overall, what we're doing here is setting up a kind of test Alice and Bob, where Alice is acting as the client, Bob is acting as the server. So Bob needs to provide a public key to Alice. That public key needs to be signed by KeyCorp so that we have a certificate, and Alice needs to trust that certificate authority by having that certificate authority's public key as her root certificate authority. That's what all those commands are doing, so that when we make the TLS connection, Alice and Bob are able to talk securely. For real purposes, you have to use real certificate authorities, of course, and real certificates from those authorities. Back when we introduced public key cryptography, we talked about how to use the OpenSS tool to generate public-private key pairs for Alice and Bob, but we didn't talk about how to be KeyCorp, because that's not something you normally do. But for testing purposes, we need to create a certificate authority that we can use to make our test certificates. So to create a certificate authority like KeyCorp, you can use OpenSSL rec like this to create a new certificate authority with its own private key. Then you don't actually take these files and directly get your signed certificate, because signing requires the private key, and in principle that belongs over at KeyCorp. So what Alice or Bob do is take their private key and generate a request for a certificate that can be sent off to KeyCorp. And then KeyCorp is going to use something like OpenSSL-CA to actually issue the certificate by signing the public key that Bob has provided and getting the certificate file out to send back to Bob.